here with me to discuss all these significant developments. Former Bernie Sanders national staffer Teslin Figaro and Washington Times opinion editor and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt, who did us the great honor of deciding to join us here instead of being with the elite there in the correspondence dinner in Washington.
I've never had a better excuse to skip the correspondence dinner. It's just such a, and I can't think of by reading the reports of it, I can't think of a better one to have skipped.
I know. Well, we'll get to that, I think. But let's just start with, I mean, there's a lot happened this week with the president and so on. Let's start with the really important and serious stuff, the foreign policy aspects. I mean, the things that we saw this week, not just Korea, which has been widely commented on for obvious reasons, but also I thought it was significant the way that he really made progress on the Iran issue with President Macron and with Angela Merkel, where, you know, just a few weeks ago, you had all the kind of foreign policy elites saying, hang on a second, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about, ripping up the Iran deal, he's not going to get anywhere with that. They're coming around to his position, but they just can't give him any credit, can they?
No, and I don't think they ever will give him credit. One of the reasons I think it would be so delightful if he did bring peace to the Korean Peninsula is not that it would just save tens of millions of fellow humans, but then the Nobel Prize Committee would be forced to give him a Nobel Prize. But even they probably wouldn't do it. They would wind up giving it to Kim Jong-un. But it really is amazing, and it's a reminder of not, you know, we talk so much about domestically about what Donald Trump has meant in terms of sort of doing things differently. But my gosh, around the world, doing things, just doing things differently, maybe in some cases doing things worse than the way the establishment was doing it, but just doing things differently. It's a breath of fresh air, and where we have been having, you know, failure after failure, you know, decades of failure. Well, doing something different is the first step towards maybe finding the right solution.
Well, Teslin, honestly, that's one of the main sort of things that he said was like, I'm just not, and that's what people saw. He's not going to be the usual kind of thing that people got used to. He's going to shake things up, do it his way. All the experts said it's going to be a disaster, particularly on foreign policy. It's going to be, you know, wreck the world. It's going to be a danger to the world. It's not really turning out like that, is it?
Well, you know, I guess it's perception is reality in PR. I guess it depends on how you look at it. But what I would say is President Trump has been consistent on who Trump is. From the moment that he started running for office, nothing has really changed. I think what the bigger thing is that people really don't expect you to say you're going to be the same person and actually do it. You know, before he was elected, everyone said, oh, when he changes, when he gets in, he's going to be so presidential, he's going to be this, going to be that. And I always tell people when you get married, it's not about, you know, oh, once we get married, maybe he's going to be different. You know, it is who it is. He is who he is. And so if people don't like it, like even they talked about in the White House correspondent dinner, they brought in an interesting point. This is the monster that you guys created. This is who you wanted. This is who you put in office. So I think he's just been consistent with that. I also would say, I'm sure, you know, he's listened to some counsel, you know, around him not doing foreign policy before, you know, outside of business. We can't assume that he hasn't, you know, tapped into his resources. You know, we really don't know. But I think it's back to just what you said, you know, whether it's good or bad or, you know, whatever it is, people are going to remain critical because he continues to go outside of the box and not doing what we are used to seeing a president do.
And what do you make of the Kanye West thing? I mean, again, widely discussed this week. What was interesting to me was when you saw the backlash from the left about Kanye. Suddenly, he wasn't really black anymore. He was rich. And so it's okay, we can hate him because he's rich, and that's why he's with Trump. It's really interesting to me the way the response from the left came into that Kanye thing.
Well, there's two perspectives. One, I'm a poet, and I'm a hip-hop head. So when I speak, I'm certainly not speaking for all poets, all hip-hop, and all African-Americans, but I thought you raised an interesting point about being rich. But let me break down to you what hip-hop's problem was.
Right.
First, hip-hop has a problem with anybody being rich. In fact, I tell rappers all the time, most of you are more Republican than you think. You either are talking about getting rich or you're already rich. So hip-hop has no problem, you know, with being rich. But what Kanye did was him coming here, especially from the conscious poet game, him being a conscious poet and turning into a rapper and speaking about consciousness. Once you've been deemed as bad for the African-American community, it is always going to be, I get criticized for coming on Fox, you know, no matter, even if I'm saying things that people believe, even if they say right on, you're right on point, it doesn't matter because Fox has been deemed already everything against what's helpful for me and my people, just being very honest.
Yeah.
So by Kanye stepping outside of that and saying, you know, listen, I want to be a free thinker. I want to have more dialogue, you know, across the table to have this conversation. I tell people all the time, somebody got to go to Fox. Somebody has to have the conversation.
Right. Well, I'm very glad it's you.
Yeah. And so because of that, because he came out and did something different and said, let's have this conversation. It is particularly with hip hop and with African Americans, he's being criticized because he's supposed to be the epitome of consciousness. Hip hop started with talking about the struggle, talking about it's like a jungle sometimes, maybe wonder how I keep from going under. So for him to come and actually talk about capitalism, talking about free capital, talking about Second Amendment, all of the things that hip hop preaches on a daily basis, Steve, my issue with Kanye is how he really rolled it out. If he wants to support Trump or support Trump administration policies that do work, which is business owners, like I'm one, which is free capital, which is free trade, all of those things, rolling it out that way, opposed to I'm just wearing a hat and I'm trying to
that's a really
make
point.
It more of a gimmick, is the problem, which why it won't be received, because he's not focusing on issue, he's talking about emotion.
That's such a great point, and I always think that's right. We've got to come back to the agenda that he ran on and whether or not he's doing it. But Charlie, I thought it was really interesting what Teslim was saying there is about, actually it picks up on what Kasich was saying, of all people, which is this, this incredible polarization and division and anger and hate. And he's reaching out of that. He's trying to get out of the boxes and actually have a conversation.
Well, that was the funny thing about the campaign. If you read the media, you'd think that it was the most polarizing campaign and all this kind of stuff. The truth is, there was a lot of polarization going on. But if two things. Donald Trump's campaign was the most issue-oriented presidential campaign I've ever covered. And that goes back a few years. The second thing is that those issues, as you pointed out, were very unifying issues. They were talking about things like freedom, breaking down, the bureaucratic barriers and things like that. And all of that, it doesn't matter what color you are. These are all very popular messages. And then, of course, the final message, all the government, has not been good to all the communities that it claims to be good to. And that was why I think that message that he delivered to African Americans, that look, what have you got to lose, was such a profound message.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we could sort of debate all that for a long time, but I just think that. I know that there's a risk that we make too much of one event, but there is something interesting happening here. I think with this, with the way that the Kanye West intervention, as it were, has kind of sparked this debate. I think it's really interesting. Anyway, thank you both.